Ok, on peut peut-être commencer. Bonjour à tous. Euh, Nous avons le plaisir aujourd'hui d'écouter les interventions de Michel Foucher, notre senior advisor, et Joohee An, gérante du fonds Action, sur la thématique de la consommation chez notre partenaire Mirai Asset, sur le thème de la consommation. Est-elle devenue le principal moteur de la consommation en Chine? Le webinaire se déroulera en français pour la première partie, qui est celle de Michel, et en anglais pour la deuxième partie, celle de Joohee. Vous devez certainement être maintenant habitué au format de visioconférence Jacqueur. Vous pourrez bien évidemment poser des questions tout au long de la conférence via le symbole de discussion tout en bas de votre écran. Nous y répondrons à la fin de chaque intervention. De nouveau, merci Michel et Joohee d'être parmi nous aujourd'hui. Je laisserai en premier lieu la parole à Michel. Mais avant cela, pour que Joohee nous comprenne, je ferai une brève introduction en anglais. So today we have the pleasure to listen to Michel Foucher and our senior advisor and Joohee An, who is the senior equity portfolio manager at Mirai Asset, managing an Asian thematic fund driven by the consumption. So the webinar will be both in French and in English. French for Michel and in English with Joohee. You should now be familiar with our conference for video conference format. So please, if you have any questions, please do use the bottom screen symbol and ask any questions you have. Once again, thank you, Michel and Joohee. Michel, the floor is yours.
Merci Amine. Bonjour à Joohee An qui est à Hong Kong. Nous sommes à Paris. Je voudrais donner quelques éléments de cadrage en 5 points. Comment expliquer ce rebond économique chinois depuis un an? Quels sont les objectifs économiques du gouvernement chinois en matière de marché intérieur? Pourquoi y a-t-il autant d'investissements étrangers, notamment américains en Chine, alors qu'il y a des tensions diplomatiques et géopolitiques? Que nous apprend notre mission économique à l'ambassade de France à Pékin sur l'accès au marché chinois? Et enfin, quelle est la place de la France dans ce dispositif? Alors, le contexte, tout le monde le connaît, il faut quand même le rappeler. Ce qui s'est passé en Chine, en gros, depuis l'entrée dans l'OMC, c'est un véritable mythe. C'est ce que dit la Banque mondiale. 800 millions de personnes sont sorties de la pauvreté, 400 millions de gens relèvent des classes moyennes, ça devient le premier marché du monde en matière de classe moyenne. Une parité de pouvoir d'achat de 18 000 dollars aujourd'hui. Donc c'est un pays qui est la deuxième économie mondiale, mais qui est en même temps un pays à revenus intermédiaires. Première touchée par le Covid, probablement encore plus tôt que cela est dit à Pékin, la première à sortir également, avec un différent de celui du krach de 2015, les financements ont été orientés vers des secteurs clés, technologie, intelligence artificielle, santé, voiture électrique, plus évidemment le numérique. Une des forces de la Chine, c'est la part de l'industrie, 40% du PIB contre 15% aux États-Unis, 20% en Allemagne, 10% en France. Les différentes assemblées qui se sont réunies, les Lianghui, qui se sont réunies au mois de mars 2021 à Pékin, ont fixé un objectif de croissance annuelle supérieur à 6%. On attendait l'absence de chiffres, un chiffre a été donné, et un objectif de doublement du PIB dans le cadre de la vision 2035, ce qui veut dire au minimum sur 12-13 ans, presque 5% de croissance par an. Alors évidemment, beaucoup de dettes, 280% du PIB, mais une orientation vers quelque chose de plus qualitatif. Alors, le marché intérieur, eh bien, depuis déjà 2017, depuis l'époque Trump, les autorités chinoises se sont inquiétées des risques de sanctions, de protectionnisme, et ils ont mis en avant un concept théorique qui est celui de la circulation duale. En réalité, deux systèmes économiques, un système intérieur fondé sur le marché intérieur et une moindre dépendance technologique, et évidemment toujours un pied dans les marchés mondiaux et les exportations. Et en fait, cette circulation duale, ce double système, évidemment, veut renforcer le marché intérieur, notamment en développant le secteur des services, le tourisme, la santé, le sport, la rénovation urbaine, les smart cities, les services de base, la réduction des écarts entre les villes et les campagnes, l'urbanisation, etc., etc. Et donc, tout ceci est évidemment positif en matière de développement du marché intérieur. On voit d'ailleurs dans la prévision des banques, Amine, est-ce que vous pouvez présenter la prévision des banques pour 2021? Je ne sais pas si on a le document ici, sinon il sera dans la lettre Jacques Coeur. En gros, il y a consensus dans les grandes banques occidentales pour un taux de croissance de 8%, 8% en moyenne totale pour une dizaine d'acteurs bancaires ou OCDE, Banque mondiale, FMI, Banque asiatique de développement. Vous voyez que les chiffres sont supérieurs à ceux annoncés par les autorités chinoises. Troisième élément sur lequel je voudrais attirer votre attention, et peut-être avec la planche suivante sur les investissements, c'est que la Chine aujourd'hui est devenue la première destination au monde des investissements étrangers, devant les États-Unis. Ça a commencé en 2020 pendant la pandémie et à la fin, ça s'est confirmé. Vous voyez ici au premier trimestre 2021, près de 45 milliards de dollars, une hausse de 43% par rapport au premier trimestre 2020 pour des raisons évidentes. Alors la Chine, ça n'est encore que 6% de la capitalisation mondiale contre 55% pour les États-Unis et 7% pour le Japon, mais le poids de la Chine va augmenter parce que seuls 20% des actions domestiques chinoises sont prises en compte dans les indices mondiaux. Et évidemment, les 80% vont être progressivement intégrés. La Chine semble fonctionner pour les grands investisseurs, notamment américains, comme une valeur refuge. Je vais vous donner quelques accords extrêmement récents. Il y a un mois, Goldman Sachs a signé un accord avec la Banque industrielle et commerciale de Chine. La Banque industrielle et commerciale de Chine, c'est une banque d'État qui a 680 millions de clients. 680 millions de clients. Donc l'enjeu, c'est bien d'avoir accès à l'épargne. BlackRock a passé un accord de partenariat de gestion de fonds avec la Banque chinoise de construction. Et JP Morgan Asset Management prévoit d'investir 415 milliards de dollars dans la China Merchant Bank. Ça date du mois de mars. On note d'ailleurs un mouvement comparable en Europe avec quelques grands acteurs, je citerai Schroders en particulier. Ce qui est tout à fait fascinant, c'est de voir que Wall Street a sa politique chinoise de présence massive, compte tenu de l'ampleur de l'épargne chinoise, que vous connaissez pour payer le logement, l'éducation, la sécurité des anciens, et puis quand même, il y a toujours un peu d'incertitude. Et donc, d'un côté, Wall Street joue la carte de la présence chinoise dans l'épargne et l'investissement, et d'autre part, Washington, le Pentagone et le département d'État sont dans une logique d'endiguement, de contention, et de sanctions ou de protectionnisme. Et ce n'est pas nouveau, mais vous voyez, de même, les firmes de l'informatique sont très intéressées par le fait que les Chinois sont beaucoup moins régulateurs que les Européens en matière de protection des données personnelles. Et il y a 800 millions d'utilisateurs de l'Internet en Chine. Donc là, il y a une contradiction, ce qui veut dire qu'il faut oublier l'idée du découplage économique entre les États-Unis, l'Europe et la Chine. Il n'y aura pas de découplage économique. En revanche, il y aura des tentatives légitimes de tous les côtés de découplage technologique. L'ambassade de France en Chine, via sa mission économique régionale, mène chaque année, au mois d'avril, une enquête sur l'accès au marché chinois. Parce que d'un côté, on nous dit que la Chine s'ouvre, mais de l'autre côté, elle protège ses champions nationaux, elle développe une innovation indigène, elle a des contraintes de sécurité qui sont très largement employées. Et donc, en fait, sur l'accès public chinois, le marché public chinois, c'est 20% du PIB, c'est presque 3 000 milliards de dollars. On a l'impression que tout est relativement fermé en fonction de l'importance stratégique que le gouvernement donne aux différents secteurs concernés et de la situation de force ou de faiblesse des mêmes secteurs. C'est un double critère qu'il faut prendre en compte. Alors, pour l'instant, il y a du retard dans l'automobile, donc on crée à toute vitesse une usine pour Tesla, tout en développant la voiture électrique. On est toujours en retard en matière d'aéronautique. La Chine envoie des missions sur la Lune et sur Mars. Elle n'a toujours pas pu certifier son moyen courrier commode, donc elle a besoin d'Airbus, de Safran et de General Electric. Pour combien de temps, on ne sait pas. Le luxe, bien entendu, les services aux entreprises avec Capgemini, des niches technologiques avec Valeo, pour citer des cas français, et naturellement tout ce qui est santé et nutrition, Hygiénie Sainte-Mère, Sanofi, Danone, tout ça c'est excellent. Il y a des limites à la croissance chinoise. J'en vois deux. D'abord, l'importance sous-estimée de la dépendance technologique, notamment en matière de moteurs d'avion, d'aéronautique, de voitures électriques, de TGV jusqu'en 2010, et bien entendu de semi-conducteurs. Et dans la confrontation entre Pékin et Taipei, Taïwan, il ne faut pas oublier que Taïwan est le leader mondial des puces et des semi-conducteurs, pratiquement 60% du marché. Et donc, la méthode chinoise pour compenser leur grande dépendance, c'est de débaucher déjà 3000 ingénieurs taïwanais avec des salaires doubles. Le réunionnisme de Pékin trouve ses limites dans la dépendance à l'égard de Taïwan. L'autre élément qu'on commence à voir apparaître, c'est la démographie. La population chinoise décline en valeur relative depuis maintenant 5 décennies. On va bientôt manquer de main-d'œuvre. Comme en Corée et comme au Japon, il n'y aura pas d'importation de main-d'œuvre étrangère. On va développer la robotisation et l'intelligence artificielle pour augmenter la productivité. Un mot pour conclure sur la France, troisième slide et les parts de marché. L'Union européenne, c'est en gros 13% du marché chinois, mais 5% pour l'Allemagne. On comprend que Berlin ne suive pas Biden et Washington dans une politique plus dure à l'égard de la Chine, comme on l'a vu lors de la visite de Biden ces dernières semaines. L'ASEAN est très présente à hauteur de 15%. La Corée du Sud à 10%. Taïwan est un acteur qui investit en Chine, qui a des parts de marché considérables. Il y a 4 millions de Taïwanais, donc tout ça, ça calme le jeu. Le Japon est très présent, évidemment, en Chine, beaucoup plus que les États-Unis, seulement 7%, et c'est très concentré sur quelques secteurs industriels. La France est toujours à 1,5, ça progresse lentement, mais vous avez un considérable déficit commercial, je dirais depuis toujours, entre la Chine et la France. Cette année, en 2020, disons à hauteur de 40 milliards de dollars, ça s'est aggravé parce qu'on a vendu moins d'avions et on a importé, tenez-vous bien, pour près de 5 milliards d'euros de masques à la Chine en 2020. Donc, on a là un vrai déséquilibre, mais d'une façon générale, le marché chinois reste indispensable pour l'économie européenne. Et je répète, il n'y aura pas de découplage économique. La Chine n'est pas l'Union soviétique, qui était inexistante au plan économique. La Chine est le deuxième acteur mondial. Vous avez une situation d'interdépendance très forte, euro-chinoise, américano-chinoise. Il y aura donc des difficultés diplomatiques ou stratégiques, mais il n'y aura pas de découplage. Donc le marché chinois reste un marché tout à fait fondamental pour les entreprises européennes, américaines, japonaises, taïwanaises, coréennes ou vietnamiennes. Je vous remercie de votre attention.
Merci, merci Michel. Je vois qu'il y a une question posée par une participante. qui concerne la question. Hein. Donc, où en est-on de l'héritage de la guerre économico-commerciale, ou de l'héritage de la guerre économico-commerciale version Trump? Et puis, deuxième partie de question, Biden gardera-t-il les mêmes positions que son prédécesseur, mais avec davantage de diplomatie?
Le déficit commercial des États-Unis au profit de la Chine à la fin de l'ère Biden était beaucoup plus important qu'au début. Et notamment avec le confinement, donc la numérisation et l'achat de matériel informatique en Chine, ça va assembler au profit des entreprises américaines. Par contre, Huawei a été interdit de séjour et il y a des sanctions extrêmement ciblées, notamment dans le domaine des microprocesseurs, dans toute une série de secteurs critiques. Et donc, la réaction chinoise, c'est de suivre une politique qui est l'équivalent de celle annoncée en France et dans l'Union européenne, celle d'une recherche de la souveraineté technologique. Donc, un déficit commercial encore plus important, donc une interdépendance encore plus forte, mais d'un autre côté, l'impossibilité pour les entreprises chinoises d'accéder maintenant aux équipements de haute technologie fabriqués aux États-Unis. Donc, tout ceci se détourne en faveur de Taïwan ou de la Corée ou du Japon, et ça a mis en difficulté Huawei. C'est une entreprise qui a beaucoup de difficultés actuellement. Donc, vous avez un bilan extrêmement contrasté. Biden va suivre la même ligne, mais là encore, qui décide de la politique chinoise? Est-ce que c'est Wall Street? Est-ce que c'est le Conseil national de sécurité? La réponse n'est pas encore claire. Beaucoup dépendra de l'Allemagne, de la France et de l'Italie, qui ne peuvent pas partager une politique considérant la Chine comme un adversaire, ou uniquement comme un adversaire, même si on sera plus prudent dans l'avenir pour éviter les prédations de nos secteurs stratégiques industriels. Mais nous sommes aussi amenés à développer une moindre dépendance, et notamment en matière de cellules souches, en matière de santé, si vous voulez. On était excessivement dépendants. Donc, on va aller vers une mondialisation un peu plus régionalisée, mais toujours dans un cadre d'interdépendance. L'indépendance dans l'interdépendance, c'est un enjeu européen, c'est un enjeu américain, c'est un enjeu chinois. La vraie menace chinoise, elle est plutôt dans l'édiction de normes et de standards complètement différents des normes et des standards démocratiques, notamment le contrôle de l'État dans tous les domaines, et notamment l'Internet. Donc là, il y a un désaccord fondamental.
Très bien, merci Michel. Plus tard, hein, vous pouvez continuer à les poser. And now, if we move to Joohee and if we try to dive deeper in the consumption side of the economy in Asia and specifically in China, we all know how the strategy has been successful and is successful, and how great is the consumption trend since many years in Asia and especially in China, thanks to your geographical positioning at Mirai. So you used to say that you leave your investments. So what a great opportunity for us to have a local view and expertise about this topic. So Joohee, the floor is yours, and I will try to share the screen and the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I'll share the screen first.
If you can do it, okay, great.
Yeah. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, just like introduce that this is Joohee An, and I have been managing Asia region for a consumer fund at Mirai Asset Global Investments for more than 10 years now. And today I will talk about the consumption with a more focus on China market. So China has been transitioning from a world's largest factory to the world's largest consumer in the global economy now. It's been already in several years. Now, considering its vast population and still low penetrations in most sectors, we believe this rising consumption theme in China will be a multi-decade theme. So even compared to other emerging markets, we expect to see more significant changes in China due to the impact of the pandemic and the new direction of the government policy as well. Thus, I will talk about why consumption will become more important growth driver in China going forward, and the current trends, and also some stock examples to benefit of this trend. So the China consumption growth may sound familiar to some of you, since we have heard from the media that China consumption consumers have emerged as the largest consumers already in many industries. For example, on the right-hand chart, you can see that Alibaba's only one promotion day's GMV, the gross merchandising value, became the biggest, actually already bigger than that of all the major promotion days combined in the US. And also the left-hand chart shows the Chinese outbound tourist expenditure is already more than double that of the US travelers. So sometimes these kind of big market size numbers that we are seeing on the media misleads investors to the thought that, oh, maybe the China consumption has grown enough already. However, I want to emphasize that the current big market size or company earning size are not because of that market is already well penetrated. That's because the population is really huge. For example, I just mentioned that the total spending of Chinese outbound travelers is already more than double that of the US travelers, but the number of passport holders in China is currently only about 10% of the population. If it goes only up to 15%, that incremental number of people is bigger than the UK population. Also, even the penetration of traditional consumer sectors, which some people think are well penetrated already, are actually only about half or less than other major countries, as the right-hand chart shows. So therefore, we need to be mindful that the China consumption growth is just, still early stage and a multi-decade thing. And that we are still trying to, find a lot of, the beneficiaries of this big growth path. So another angle that explains why consumption in China will become a more important growth driver is the government policy support. So as you can see from the left-hand chart, China is still one of the countries where the imbalance between consumption and investment is the largest. The Chinese government has been making efforts to transition its economy to a more consumption-driven economy, but the current imbalance is still very high. So in 2020, last year in particular, the government efforts to revitalize and stimulate the economy to cope with the pandemic, this imbalance actually got more extensive. As you can see on the right-hand graph, the dark blue color is the contribution from consumption, and its role became almost zero last year. Therefore, the government seems very resolute in changing the direction of the policy from this year. China has issued 5-year plans every 5 years since 1953, and each 5-year plan included GDP growth target per annum, as you can see from the first table. However, for the first time in history, the government did not suggest any economic growth target for the 14th 5-year plan that starts from this year, 2021. They instead focused on qualitative sides to address more structural and long-term issues, which is quite different from the previous approach by putting more focus on speed and scale of the growth. First, they focused on internal circulation. So its goal is to become more independent from external market for both supply and demand. Especially for demand side, they want to grow its own consumer market to be big enough to digest the goods and services that the domestic companies manufacture or produce, so that they can reduce the reliance on export in economic growth. Second, they suggested urbanization version 2. China's urbanization pace for the last 40 years is unprecedented in world history. However, as they have faced lots of side effects from its fast development, the government seems to have realized that it is really time to redefine the urbanization in a more sustainable way. So they emphasized the quality and the people over speed and scale of economic growth number. This is why we believe the new 5-year plan does not include any GDP growth target. And also another event that shows how resolute the government is transitioning its policy to more quality and sustainable way is the recent annual NPC meeting. So it's held every March to discuss the policy direction for the year. So in March, the GDP growth target the government suggested for this year was only 6%. Which is much lower than the market consensus of 8.4%. So it seems that they regret that most of the benefits from the stimulus measures they deployed in 2020 went to the local government or corporates, not to households. The much lower than expected GDP growth target for this year may imply that they will focus on more long-term structural issues rather than support short-term economic growth. So this is just in line with the tone that we saw from the 14th 5-year plan. So by doing so, we expect the private households and individual consumers will get more benefits from this new transition that the government seems very resolute to make. Thus, we believe domestic consumption will play even more important role in economic growth from this year, 2021. So then from here, so let's take a look, take a more closer look at China consumer market. It's also its recent trends and investment opportunities in it. So in China market, especially young generations consumption patterns are very different as they grew up with a new technology and globalization and different kind of cultures. At the same time, China is starting to see aging population issue as well, which creates different demands from what the younger generation wants. That means the beneficiaries of the overall consumption growth in China are becoming very diverse in terms of sector. So from traditional consumer sectors to healthcare or insurance, retail banking, IT, etc. So we believe that the proper approach to China consumption growth theme should be beyond traditional consumer sectors. For example, here you can see that how different each age group's interests are. So 80s, 90s, and even younger consumers are more interested in online services, consumer discretionary and IT products, while the older generations are interested in healthcare, insurance, and other consumer staples. For another example for how different newly emerging consumers are in China compared to the previous ones. So these are about luxury shopping. The left chart shows the millennials and Generation Z who are emerging as one of the major consumers for luxury brands now, have different reasons when they choose to buy the luxury products. The majority of consumers of age 40 or above considered brand as the #1 contributing factor for luxury purchase. However, about 30% of millennials and Gen Z picked other factors as the most important reason to buy luxury brands, such as design, fabric, production process, etc. Also, another consumer group newly emerging for luxury shopping is actually from lower tier cities in China. So if you look at the right-hand chart, then you can see that one of their different consumption habits is they easily adopt online channels for luxury shopping. This is very different from the consumers in Shanghai or Beijing or other top tier cities. So the pandemic also made some important changes in consumer habits too. So here is the changes I think we could see from last year specifically. So as the left-hand chart shows, consumers trading up trend for premium products got accelerated last year because consumers care more about their health now and other qualitative factors. However, it does not necessarily benefit foreign brands in China market, as you can see on the right-handed chart. Last year, when China was going through the pandemic, local brands still posted positive growth, while the growth of foreign brands turned negative. We have seen gradual changes in consumption patterns to this direction for the last 3 to 4 years, of course, but the pace accelerated in 2020 much faster than we thought. The consumer's old perception of foreign brands and local brands are changing now. That is because the younger generation, such as millennials and Gen Z, are tech savvy, and meaning they easily access detailed information about the products online and compare apple to apples before they purchase. In the past, foreign brands used to sell just at a premium once it enters the market, China market. Sometimes just regardless of the product quality, just because that's a foreign brand, they used to sell at premium, but now it is not the case anymore. More importantly, the Chinese young consumers' pride in their country has supported the local brands to rise further. So since the U.S.-China tension between the two, the countries' tension became severe in 2018, they have shown their patriotism online more and more. And this kind of environment has been supportive of local brands as long as the quality, the product quality is good. So this trend became sturdier last year as they became more and more proud of being Chinese after they saw the Chinese containment of the virus was faster than other countries. These two photos on the left side are the Chinese sportswear brand Li-Ning's New York Fashion Week runway photos. This brand is very symbolic for nationalism because the founder is China's first Olympic medalist. This is not a new company at all. Actually, it was founded about 30 years ago, and it made lots of mistakes and learned lessons for the last few decades. And finally, it is rising as a leading brand in sports leather wear industry. If you look at the photos very closely, then you can see the 4 big letters in the middle of its outfit. It says 中国 Li-Ning. The 中国 means China. So they added this word before Li-Ning when they launched its higher end sub-brand. And it is selling very, very well. Celebrities also tend to choose this local brand when they are seen in public too. Besides this sportswear industry, we see the emergence of local brands in various sectors, even including baby products, not to mention smartphones or other home appliances. The bottom, and if you look at the upper side, upper right side, the table, then you can see that the top 5 cosmetic brands that were selling the best on online promotion day are already local Chinese brand. So Chinese companies have made lots of efforts to enhance product quality for the last several years. And so the perception of made in China or made by China products is not just a cheap copycat anymore. So plus the patriotism of the young consumers is boosting the emergence of lots of local brands. So like you can see the share price movement of Li-Ning on the bottom right side, then you can see how strong their share price has been for the last few years, and we are still positive on it. And the next trend that we believe is very interesting and important for the investment is the new wave in tourism and duty-free consumption in China. So you may have heard that the Chinese are the biggest consumers in the global luxury good industry. And out of this Chinese luxury spending, about 70% or higher was spent out of China when they traveled overseas. However, as you can see on the left top graph, the more than 70% of luxury spending was done inside mainland China in 2020. This big jump was owing to two reasons. First, the pandemic kept people from outbound traveling, and the domestic tourism replaced some of the travel demand. And second, the Chinese government took advantage of this situation to bring back this luxury spending of its middle-class consumers back to its own market. So they announced a much larger scale than expected relaxation in duty-free policies in July last year. It has tripled the annual spending limit at duty-free shops, and online purchases for the following 6 months after a visit to an offline shop has been allowed too. And then the limits on the number of items they can buy were also lifted or relaxed a lot in most categories. As a result, duty-free sales growth in 2020 can almost doubled, while the overall retail sales posted negative growth due to the pandemic, as the left bottom chart shows. So this move accelerates the recent changes in the travel habits of young consumers. So recently, they would spend less time before the pandemic, when they actually go overseas for traveling, they would spend less time for good shopping and spend more time for new experiences when they travel outside overseas. Maybe it was influenced by their usage of SNS, social networking services, because experiences are much better to share on social networking services. And with this photos of restaurants and other experiences, they can actually show off what they are experiencing and then sharing with their friends. So they want to spend more time on experiences rather than goods when they are outside. And with this policy relaxation, consumers are expected to spend more money at onshore duty-free shops before they get on the plane, even if outbound tourism will be resumed post-pandemic. So the pandemic triggered the change of the consumers' luxury spending habits, and it's expected to be boosted by the government policy relaxation going forward. Repatriation of luxury consumption is helpful for China's economic transition to the consumption-driven economy, and we are positive on the beneficiaries of this new trend. The biggest beneficiary is China Tourism Group Duty Free, the biggest duty-free operator in Hainan Island. Hainan Island is like so-called China's Hawaii, which is located in south part of China. And this is also the biggest duty-free operator in the whole China national market. So you can see its share price performance, which has been strong since last year, when we saw very the kind of aggressive policy relaxation. Next trend is online. Obviously, the online engagement got deeper under the pandemic. Actually, China was already ahead of developed markets regarding online service penetration. Younger generation have had this development, but it penetrated new consumers in the older group by age, and also in lower tier cities by region through the pandemic. So it's not only new users, for the existing users as well. Actually, the time spending increased about 35% after the pandemic started. So as the pandemic is becoming longer than initially thought, the consumers' new habits for online services are becoming a new normal. So this means online services will remain an important sector in consumption theme even after the pandemic. So only due to the recent regulations by the government, its competitive landscape is starting to change in China. So China has almost been duopoly market with Tencent, Alibaba group for the last 20 years, but it is moving to more kind of multiplayer markets driven by antitrust regulations, as well as more innovative innovative and new formats and services developed by other smaller players. So the sentiment could be weak on this sector in the near term because of the regulatory uncertainties, but we are still positive on these online businesses and believe sometime in the second half of this year could give some good entry points for the kind of high quality and competitive companies to invest. And lastly, I would like to talk about a new move in healthcare industry. So healthcare sector is one of the least penetrated for online in China. So when the country was going through the pandemic early last year, so both consumers and the government they all realized how important to connect the healthcare services to online infrastructure. The government started to support the building of online healthcare infrastructure with relaxation of policies. So for example, when consumers purchase the medicines online, then now they can get the insurance reimbursement, which was not possible before. So in this kind of new changes, there will be two business models that are online pharmacy and telemedicine will benefit. So Alibaba Health and JD Health are the leaders for e-pharmacy model, while the Ping An Good Doctor is leading the industry development and growth of telemedicine. So most companies in this area are not yet profitable, as this is still in the initial investment phase, but we are positive on the online health industry from mid to long-term perspective. So far, I have explained the importance of consumption in the overall China economy, and then introduced some new trends, and mostly driven by new generations with some stock examples together. The main points are the consumption is still very underpenetrated, and it will become more and more important growth driver for the next decades. When it comes to investment in this theme, we need to look at various sectors, not just traditional consumer sectors, as the changes in consumption behaviors are more dynamic, and in terms of where and how they spend their money. So thank you for taking your time today, and any questions will be welcomed if time permits. Thank you.
Thank you, Joohee. Thank you for the presentation. As you can imagine, the topic is very interesting, and we have few questions there. So the first one is, so I'll tell it. As the consumption trend is getting higher, should we expect the consumption level pre-pandemic to come back?
Well, it depends on the industry. So I think except outbound tourism and then some restaurants, I think most other the consumer sectors already went back to the 2019 level. So for example, like restaurants, some hot pot, and they kind of almost it recovered to like 80 or 90%, like 1 or 2 quarters before, but it went kind of it's getting slower again because of the kind of resurgence of cases recently in China. And then outbound tourism, of course, it depends on the situations in the US and Europe. But I think still, even though the vaccination rate is going up, but we are now starting to worry about the variants, right? So new variants. So let's see. So the outbound tourism, I think that the recovery could be even slower. So except those two segments, I think other areas already recovered to 2019 level, I would say.
Okay, thank you, Joohee. So the second question is there any governmental measures set up to support the consumption? And if it's yes, would it be possible to elaborate more about some of them?
Well, I think there are many small policies as well, but I think the most meaningful and then biggest one was like a hukou reform. And the hukou reform has been talked about by the even previous governments, I think for decades already, because a hukou system means if you are born in like the lower tier cities, but if you want to move to like bigger tier cities to make money, like immigrants, right? Then you cannot get any benefits on healthcare or some education for your kids. So they kind of inefficiency made the living costs really high. So that almost like 300-400 million the kind of rural immigrants who are working in big cities, they used to be struggling with a really high level of the living costs because of that the hukou system. So that's why the saving ratio was very high as well, because they had to just keep saving for their future because they cannot get the benefits from the government. So the government finally they realized how inefficient and how kind of big this bottleneck is to boost consumption. So now finally all the most local governments they started to reform this. So now I think in terms of number I need to get updated, but I think like 15 to above like provinces already they allow like a rural immigrants, they can get the same kind of benefits, although they have the kind of rural hukou. So that means that's a really like big change, and then very symbolic and meaningful changes. So although we are not seeing the very kind of direct impacts at this moment, because they are just very gradually starting, and then the local governments, I think they have to change a lot of stuff on the documents, and because it takes time, but finally they are starting to reform. So I think going forward, I think those people will become more important contributor to consumption growth in China.
Okay, thank you, Joohee. And maybe the last but not least question, are there any inflation issues we have to worry about, and how does the Chinese government manage these kind of issues?
In the inflation?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's not only China. So all the, especially like even auto sector or F&B, all the consumer sectors, except raw material sector, I think most other the sectors they have been worried about the GP margin, right? To be squeezed by this inflation. But I would say, this: the two things is one. If you actually talk to the leading companies who have more kind of buffers to manage other costs, then I think that GP margin, the impact is much lower. So for example, it's not only China. So the very recent communication with some Indian companies, for example, will be similar in China as well. So the average, the GP margin impact was 7 to 8% because of the recent and commodity prices inflation. But the companies that we are holding, which are all leading companies and kind of larger sized, and then they have more experiences in managing this kind of price, not like risks. So their impact was only 1 or 2% point only, so which is much lower than just industry average. So as long as you can actually pick the high quality stocks, then I think that impact is much lower. And then second thing is well, we need to keep watching. But a few days ago, the Chinese government, they also mentioned that they will kind of reduce the reserve to push their, the steel and then other commodities to the market. That's why there's some like impact on the prices. So I think, yeah, Chinese government, we don't know how sustainable that kind of way could be going forward. So in the market, still there are some controversial like opinions, but I think from my perspective and our house view, this community-driven inflation, I think it's not going to continue that long. Of course, for the next 1 or 2 maybe quarters, we could see more kind of similar move, and we could see more market rotation into values as well. But I think now we are starting to go through some inflection point, I think.
Okay, thank you very much, Joohee. I'm saying that time is running. Maybe it's time to conclude. Beginning by Michel. Now I have to switch to French. Michel, peut-être une interrogation pour conclure. Quels pourraient être les enjeux politico-économiques auxquels un investisseur devra prêter attention, ou une attention particulière, surtout sur cette zone géographique qui est la Chine ou l'Asie de manière générale?
D'abord, je voulais que nos auditeurs remarquent les convergences d'analyse, alors que nous ne sommes pas concernés, nous ne sommes pas concertés. On a eu le même diagnostic de base. Au fond, les références occidentales de consommation demeurent, mais maintenant, c'est de plus en plus avec des produits chinois, puisque les Chinois ne voyagent plus. Et donc, on est passé, par exemple, dans les industries de luxe en France, à des systèmes de e-commerce. Donc, ça reste l'un des premiers marchés du monde, je dirais, durablement. C'est un pays qui a tous les inconvénients qu'on connaît par rapport à nos systèmes démocratiques, mais c'est un pays où il y a des plans qui sont respectés. Le plan quinquennal, il est respecté. C'est une économie qui est bien gérée. Il y a des erreurs, mais il y a des objectifs de long terme, si vous voulez. Donc il y a un pilotage. Il y a un pilotage. Et ça, c'est un élément intéressant. Alors, c'est vrai que c'est l'une des premières fois dans l'histoire qu'un marché aussi important concerne un pays qui est toujours un pays de revenus intermédiaires. Les pays dominants de l'OCDE sont les pays les plus riches. Là, la Chine s'impose alors que ce n'est pas le plus riche. Mais c'est un très, très grand marché. Mais c'est un marché de niche, c'est-à-dire qu'il faut aller en Chine et soutenir les investissements en Chine si on est sûr que ce sont des secteurs stratégiques où les Chinois sont encore faibles. C'est ce que j'ai essayé de dire tout à l'heure. Donc, il y a vraiment une approche, au fond, il faut essayer de faire un effort pour penser comme eux. Le risque, c'est l'erreur d'analyse, si vous voulez, de diagnostic.
Entendu. Merci, Michel. Just for you, Joohee, Michel just said that that without speaking to each other before the presentation, you share the same point of view on many points regarding the China situation. Maybe it's time for you to conclude, Joohee, with another question. So today we mainly spoke about the consumption in China. Maybe it would be interesting to know, why do we have to have a look on the consumption in Asia, generally speaking?
Oh, well, the Asian countries, well, yeah, so China market is very, very important for consumption story in Asia, of course. But if you look at India or Korea or other ASEAN, emerging ASEAN, they actually have all different, very interesting but different stories. So, for example, in China, today I talked about more like internet, online luxury shopping, or tourism, the kind of next level of consumption. If you actually look at the Indian market, for example, that's also population size will be similar. almost like a 1.4 billion population, but their urbanization ratio is only 35%. So which means still, if you look at traditional consumer sectors, but still, that the investment potential is huge. So our portfolio in India, in Korea, for example, in Korea has another different, very interesting stories as well, even though the Korea is less emerging markets compared to maybe India or other emerging countries in Asia. But for example, Korea now, their online market is moving to opposite way to compared to China. So China, for example, so in terms of the bottom up stock picking, so from I'm a stock picker, I would say. So from a stock picker's perspective, actually Korean market is very, very interesting for consumption story. So especially in online sector. So I would say overall Asian market is moving to the biggest consumers, and China is also very important, actually most important, but also the India and other, the countries also have very interesting and promising story to get benefit when you are investing in it.
Thank you, Joohee. Now maybe it's time to say few words. So, Michel, pour les prochains rendez-vous du club Jacques Coeur, c'est alors je crois qu'on est en train de réfléchir pour les thématiques à aborder. Le prochain se déroulera au mois de septembre. Le thème vous sera communiqué assez rapidement par la compagnie financière.
On aura d'abord un petit déjeuner à l'hôtel Ritz. On va reprendre la tradition de François-Xavier, hein. Un petit déjeuner dans de très bonnes conditions de sécurité encore, autour de Sylvie Berman, ambassadeur de France, qui a été en poste à Pékin, à Londres au moment du Brexit et à Moscou. Et elle viendra présenter en plus ces deux ouvrages. C'est quelqu'un d'extraordinairement expérimenté. Au mois de septembre, nous réfléchissons à essayer de faire le point sur la situation française et européenne, je dirais avant Covid, pendant le Covid et après le Covid. Un point de situation au mois de septembre. Et puis, pour la suite, on traitera évidemment de la situation allemande après les élections et d'autres sujets qui s'imposeront. Et bien entendu, pour conclure sur les perspectives de la présidence française de l'Union européenne, premier semestre 2022, donc on traitera ça au mois de décembre. Voilà le programme à ce stade. Donc vous êtes tous invités à l'hôtel Ritz le 9 juillet au matin. 9 juillet au matin, 8h30. Hein, on reprend les bonnes habitudes.
Et rappelez peut-être également qu'à l'issue de cette webconférence, la lettre
Jacques Coeur. Il y a la lettre Jacques Coeur, et puis la conférence est enregistrée et filmée. Vous pouvez donc vous reporter aux différents documents chiffrés, en particulier ce que Joohee An nous a présenté, avec vraiment un choix d'indicateurs extrêmement intéressant. Joohee, you have selected very meaningful figures and indicators of the market. Very precise: passport holders, tourism, duty-free in Hainan, and the President Xi himself flew to Hainan to visit a duty-free shop, and development of e-commerce, which is absolutely spectacular, etc., etc. This is and I like your link between market and nationhood. National products. So the customer are starting with Western references, Yves Saint Laurent, Dior, and they end up with Chinese product. This is very interesting. This is absolutely new and, in my sense, underestimated. But in Hong Kong, you are closer to the market, of course. This is new, and this is an effect of the closing of the country with the pandemic. But the reference is still there, but with a new offer, which is a Chinese one. This is this is fascinating, Chinese creativity. This is remarkable.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for saying that. Well, so especially I believe that many investors are already familiar with how important the consumption story in China. But I think I just wanted to share more kind of very recent changes and kind of new trends, mostly driven by younger generation. I think it's not kind of well updated. From investors' perspective, that's what I felt from our previous kind of, a lot of meetings with investors in the U.S. and in Europe. So I hope it helped. It was helpful.
So the last word then would be for our participants, if you would like to go deeper in the topic, CFJC will be happy to arrange a video conference or a conf call with Joohee.
Okay, thank you.
So, donc, merci à tous d'avoir participé.
Thank you for joining Hong Kong. Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci,
Thank you very much.
It's dinner time for you now.
Yeah. Hope you will have a good day.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Bye.
Enjoy your lunch.
Bye.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
evening, Joohee.
Bye.
Bye bye. Have a good day.
Bye. Bye.